That's going to be it for the last word tonight. The Rachel Maddow Show is up next. Good evening, Rachel.
Good evening, Lawrence. Thank you. And thanks to you at home for staying with us for the next hour. We begin tonight with a story that is not happening in Washington, D.C. So most of the Beltway press will not tell you that it's happening at all. But it is the story that I think is the single most telling thing in American politics right now about the difference between the two parties, about the choice and basic philosophy that we've got to make about how we shall be governed as Americans. Despite what you will hear day in, day out from Washington, the difference between the two parties right now is not about President Obama versus House Speaker John Boehner, or even if you want to get really geeky, between Senator Harry Reid and Congressman Paul Ryan. We tend to talk about politics in those terms, in terms of personalities, obviously, or the radical budget proposal of the week that's never going anywhere, but will drag the whole country to the right in policy terms anyway while it's trying. We tend to talk about politics in America like that. But frankly, those are stand-ins for the real debate. For the real debate between the two parties' visions of what government ought to do, of what politics are for. Not about what people say they're for, but how they will act if they are in office. And if you want to know about that, you have to go here, to Michigan's great Southwest, to the little twin cities on the shore of Lake Michigan. Last night, we talked about how one of these twin cities, St. Joseph, population 8,500, is nearly 90% white, has a per capita income of about $33,000. The other twin city, right across there, is Benton Harbor. Benton Harbor, population 10,000 plus. It is nearly 90% black. Benton Harbor has a per capita income of about $10,000, a third of what its twin city enjoys. Michigan's new Republican governor is a man named Rick Snyder. Governor Snyder has spent his first few months in office engaged in an aggressive campaign to strip Michiganders' union rights and to pass big new taxes on the poor and the elderly, using that revenue not to plug the state's budget deficit, but rather to give it away to corporations and to the already well-off. That platform has not been kind to Governor Snyder's popularity. But the one thing in Mr. Snyder's approach to governing that brought out the biggest protests in the Capitol, reportedly the biggest protest that Lansing, Michigan had ever seen. The catalyst for those huge crowds, those thousands of people, was in part a Rick Snyder law that takes away people's right to choose their local elected officials. A law that allows the state to declare your town a failure and to appoint an emergency financial person to be the new boss over the elected officials in your town. Someone who can order them to do things, who can undo what they have done as elected officials, who can fire them if he or she so decides. The state is not only coming in and saying, we don't care who you elected to represent you, we're firing them and taking over ourselves. The state is also claiming the power to just abolish your town. When was your town founded? Who were your town founding fathers or founding mothers? The state says we can dissolve your town now. We could wipe you off the map, give your land and your assets to the next town over if we want to, just roll up the whole deal and deed it over. Your town doesn't get a say in the matter. The first town to feel the tender ministrations of Governor Snyder's new law is Little Benton Harbor, one of the poorest towns in the state. And yes, despite the Rust Belt decline that has defined life in Benton Harbor for decades, Benton Harbor is also home to the global headquarters for Whirlpool Appliances. Among the heirs to the Whirlpool Appliances fortune is Benton Harbor's Republican Congressman Fred Upton. A former Fred Upton staffer, Republican State Rep Al Pashulka, he represents Benton Harbor in the State House. He's the person who introduced the emergency state takeover bill that Governor Rick Snyder signed. This is their ceremonial reenacting of the signing there. Until last year, Mr. Pashulka served on the board of directors for a nonprofit that wants to build a $500 million, 530-acre lakefront Jack Nicklaus-designed golf course and luxury real estate development that would span both relatively wealthy St. Joseph and poor little Benton Harbor. A development that eats the one collective asset that Benton Harbor had, Benton Harbor's beautiful beachfront park. It would turn it into a place where caddies carry bags for Whirlpool executives and for rich folks who drive in from Chicago for a weekend at their new luxury signature home. I don't know what a signature home is, but they're very expensive and they're part of the whole golf course deal. Benton Harbor's park, Gene Clock Park, was deeded as a gift to the town, one of the poorest towns in Michigan. It was deeded to the town in perpetuity in 1917. Perpetuity, I guess, is not as long as it used to be. because now Benton Harbor residents are looking at a golf course where the cost of an annual pass for a family to play there is $5,000. $5,000 is half the average annual income of actual families living in Benton Harbor. This golf course development thing is not for them. And neither, apparently, is Democratic local government. On Friday, Benton Harbor's new state-appointed emergency overseer, Joe Harris, issued an executive order that restricted the mayor and the city commissioners to 3 duties. They can call a meeting, they can approve the meeting minutes, and they can adjourn the meeting. 3 things that elected officials of Benton Harbor are now allowed to do. That's it. That story broke in the Michigan Messenger, which is one of the few media outlets that has been covering this story with diligence. Last night, as we were covering the story of Benton Harbor, the Benton Harbor City Commission met for the first time since the emergency manager guy there told them that they, had been turned into pillars of salt, more or less. The manager knew this meeting apparently might get a little bit hot. He set up a 2-minute timer for anyone who wanted to speak up at this meeting, and this is what he got from local residents.
Somebody about to go, and I think it's gonna have to be Joe.
That's right. He's not even an elected official.
That's right.
He's gonna fire the mayor. How you gonna fire a mayor? Adolf Hitler was a dictator. Now we have a dictator in Joseph Harris. We have allowed this man to be too comfortable in our home.
We're not gonna let it stop at the foot of a so-called giant who's really a grasshopper.
And ain't nobody gonna take this from me or my voice, because the Constitution still do stand, and I have a voice. It ain't no piece of paper gonna take that from me.
Godwin's law notwithstanding, that's how it went last night in Benton Harbor, Michigan. As the Michigan blog Electablog that's been covering the story pointed out, it is sort of striking that some of the Republicans in Washington now are spending their down-to-the-wire, shut down the government budget meetings, trying to defund 4 of President Obama's policy czars. Remember this? They're 4 jobs that are not filled, so it's a move that is purely symbolic. It carries precisely 0 implications for federal policy. It's just that they are supposedly ideologically opposed to czars now, and they want eliminating czars to be one of the things that they might shut down the federal government in order to do. But when it comes to czars, when it really comes to czars, what's happening in Benton Harbor, Michigan is kind of czar with a capital C, or T, depending on how you spell it. This is really, really, really big intrusive government. This is sit down, shut up, your elections don't matter, we're in charge now, authoritarian, giant government. And this ought to be the debate about what's on offer right now from American politics. This ought to be the debate about the 2 major parties right now, about whether we are okay as Americans with really big take-over-your-town intrusive government, because that is what is on offer. I realize that the debate in D.C. is going to be about the Gang of 6, whether the Democrats are really going to let them change the Social Security retirement age, and that is fine. That is a real debate. It is important, but on real policy, real implications, real governing, not what people are saying they're going to do, but what they're actually doing,